Have you ever loved someone so much that even a small misunderstanding feels like the whole world is falling apart? This past week in the US, my marriage felt like a mirror reflecting every old wound I tried to bury. And somehow even my English, my words, my voice, kept failing me at the worst moments. In this video, I'll tell you how a simple argument turned into a journey of healing, love, and learning to speak, both in English and in my heart again. A quiet Sunday fight. Imagine you're standing in the kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning. The fridge door still open, and your partner asks a question so simple that your brain suddenly shuts down. It's like your nervous system whispers, "Nope, not today. Handle this yourself." That's exactly how our small argument began last week here in the US. No big drama. No raised voices. Just two adults being dragged back into old wounds they thought they had already buried. And the funny or painfully ironic part? Everything started with one tiny question. "Are you okay?" Question meant to care. But if you grew up in a place where emotions were inconvenient, that question can feel like a surprise test you didn't study for. Your brain flips into defense mode, and your heart crawls into a small invisible box and locks itself in. You don't say, "I'm fine." You don't say, "I'm not fine." You just go silent. And silence in a marriage is gasoline poured on misunderstanding. She looked at me like she was trying to hear a language that didn't exist. Meanwhile, I was trying to use English to explain feelings I hadn't even fully identified. And you know how it goes. When your emotions are tangled, your English slides around like butter on a hot pan. Every sentence I tried to form came out slightly off, too cold, too short, too far from what I really meant. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just our marriage that needed healing. My voice did too. On some weird neurological level, when you're stressed, your brain treats your second language like a stranger. It keeps its distance. It gets cautious. It refuses to open the door. And instead of sharing what's actually going on inside, you fall back on safe, flat sentences with no soul in them. Science explains this neatly. When your nervous system enters threat mode, the language centers quiet down to save energy for survival. In other words, your brain is basically throwing a tantrum on your behalf. That tiny argument opened a door I'd avoided for years. I didn't struggle to express emotions because of English. I struggled because my inner child never learned how to speak in the first place. And marriage, with all its closeness and vulnerability, pressed directly on that tender spot. By the end of the morning, we both went quiet. But for once, it wasn't a cold, punishing silence. It felt like two people standing at the edge of a conversation that could change everything. A part of me wanted to walk away, pretend nothing happened. But another part knew exactly what this moment really was. A choice between continuing to hide or finally starting to heal. Words that missed. There's a strange kind of heartbreak that happens when you say the right words in the right language at the right moment, and somehow they still land wrong. That was me, later that afternoon, sitting on the edge of our bed, trying to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. You know that feeling when your English sentences are technically correct, but emotionally useless? Like you're speaking with your mouth, but not with your heart. I tried saying, "I didn't mean to upset you." She nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe me. That I tried again. "I'm just tired." She nodded again, but it wasn't the truth, and we both knew it. It's funny how in relationships, The words that matter most are the ones you avoid. And your partner can always sense the gap. Like hearing a song where one instrument is slightly out of tune. You can't name the problem, but you can feel it in your bones. That here's something psychology says. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, your brain shifts from communication mode to protection mode. That means clarity drops, tone flattens, and your ability to express vulnerability becomes about as reliable as a Wi-Fi signal in the middle of a storm. It's not that you don't want to connect, you literally can't. Your nervous system is too busy putting out imaginary fires. And there I was trying to use English, my second language, to decode feelings I hadn't even translated in my first language. No wonder the words missed. No wonder she felt distant. No wonder everything sounded like the emotional equivalent of a software update. Necessary but completely devoid of warmth. At one point she said, "It's not what you're saying. It's what you're not saying." And that line hit me harder than any argument ever could. Because she was right. The real problem wasn't vocabulary. It wasn't grammar. It wasn't pronunciation. It was the emotional bandwidth behind the words. It was the child in me who learned early on that speaking up meant trouble, that honesty brought punishment, that feelings were better hidden behind silence or a joke. And even though I was now an adult in a stable marriage, that scared little version of me still held the microphone during every difficult conversation. When I finally looked at her, really looked, I realized something painful. She wasn't upset because I'd said the wrong thing. She was hurting because she couldn't feel me inside any of the things I said. My sentences were like empty rooms. Technically there, but no one living inside them. That's when I knew this wasn't a language problem. This was a healing problem. And healing requires a different kind of fluency, the kind where your voice stops running away from your truth. The long drive home. There's something about driving alone that turns your car into a confession booth. Maybe it's the humming of the engine. Maybe it's the way the world passes by too fast for you to hold on to. Or maybe it's just the silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for answers but refuses to let you hide. That evening, after our failed attempt at talking, I found myself driving with no real destination, just letting the road decide where my feelings should go. You ever notice how memories sneak up on you when you're emotionally raw? Like your brain keeps a folder labeled unsolved childhood stuff and decides to open it exactly when you're least prepared. One red light, one empty street, and suddenly I was 8 years old again, sitting at a dinner table where no one listened and everyone talked over each other. Back then, the safest thing to do was stay quiet. Quiet meant invisible. Invisible meant safe. And here I was decades later in the United States, married to someone who actually wanted to hear me, but my body was still following a script written in a house thousands of miles away. It's absurd when you think about it, how your past can hold the remote control to your present without your permission. Neuroscience calls it implicit memory, which is basically a fancy way of saying your body remembers things you forgot. And on that drive, mine remembered everything. I caught myself whispering sentences into the empty car, practicing what I should have said, like a kid rehearsing lines before a school play. I'm scared you'll misunderstand me. I don't want to disappoint you. I don't know why I freeze. Each line felt like stepping onto a frozen lake, not sure where the ice would crack. And then came the guilt, the kind that hits your chest like a slow, heavy wave. because she wasn't the enemy. She wasn't attacking me. She was reaching out, and I responded with silence born from a childhood she never caused. That's the thing people rarely talk about. Healing in marriage isn't just about learning to love better. It's about unlearning the things that kept you alive when you were small. Somewhere on a quiet stretch of highway, I realized that my English wasn't failing me. My vocabulary wasn't broken. My grammar wasn't the problem. The real issue was this. You can't speak clearly in any language if you're terrified of being truly seen. Your tongue can't form honest sentences when your heart is hiding behind old walls. By the time I turned the car around, something had shifted. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't suddenly brave. But I was aware that the conversation I needed to have wasn't just with her. It was with the little version of me still curled up in the back seat of my mind, waiting for permission to exist. That I drove home slowly, almost tenderly, as if softness could guide me the rest of the way. Her soft question. There are questions that feel like a punch, and then there are questions that feel like someone gently pressing on a bruise you didn't know was still there. When I walked through the door that night, she didn't look angry. She didn't look tired. She just looked concerned in that quiet way that makes you feel both loved and exposed. And then she asked the question that cracked something open inside me. What are you afraid I'll see in you? It wasn't accusation. It wasn't pressure. It was tenderness wrapped in curiosity. And the moment she said it, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The one that shows up when someone gets too close to the truth you've spent years avoiding. You know that feeling when your brain tries to protect you by pretending nothing's wrong while your body screams the opposite. It's like your nervous system becomes a malfunctioning translator. Psychology calls this emotional incongruence. When your inside world and your outside behavior don't match. It's basically your inner child yelling from a locked room while the adult version of you smiles and says, "Everything's fine." Her question unlocked that door. For the first time in days, I didn't reach for a safe English phrase like, "I'm okay," or "I just need time." The kind of lines that feel like bubble wrap, soft, protective, and completely useless. Instead, something inside me, small, shaky, and terribly honest, rose to the surface. I didn't answer right away. I sat there, staring at the floor like the truth might be hiding in the wood grain. And in that silence, my mind replayed every moment from childhood when vulnerability was punished, mocked, or ignored. How do you tell the person you love that you're afraid of being truly known? That you fear they'll see your flaws and decide you're too much or not enough? When I finally spoke, the words came out uneven, like they had to squeeze through years of dust. "I'm afraid you'll see the parts of me I never healed. Not poetic, not perfect, but real." She didn't turn away. She didn't sigh. She didn't analyze. She simply reached out and rested her hand on my arm. No lecture, no fixing, just presence. And somehow that small gesture did what 1,000 eloquent sentences could not. It told my nervous system, "You're safe. You can stay." In that moment, I learned something surprising. Sometimes the most powerful communication in English, or any language, isn't fluency. It's sincerity. It's the courage to let someone see the mess inside you without dressing it up in perfect grammar. Her soft question didn't just open a conversation. It opened a doorway between us. A doorway I didn't know how to walk through yet, but for the first time I wanted to. Relearning how to love. Strange thing about love. It doesn't care how old you are, how fluent your English is, or how many self-help books you've read. When the moment of truth arrives, you're suddenly 12 years old again, standing in front of someone you love, trying to explain feelings you barely understand. And there I was sitting across from her at the kitchen table, realizing that if I wanted our marriage to grow, I had to relearn something I thought I already knew: how to love out loud. Not the Instagram version of love. Not the "here's a long paragraph I spent an hour editing" kind of love. I'm talking about the messy, slow, honest love. The kind where you speak even when your voice shakes. And for me, that meant learning how to communicate in English with something more important than grammar: vulnerability. The next morning I tried something different. Instead of reaching for polished, protective phrases, I chose simple ones. I felt overwhelmed yesterday. I didn't know how to explain my feelings. I want to do better with you. Nothing fancy. Nothing poetic. But according to psychologists, simplicity is what your nervous system trusts most. The more emotional weight a moment carries, the more your brain benefits from short, clear sentences. Long, complicated explanations actually increase anxiety because your thoughts have too many places to hide. She listened. Really listened. And for the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't fighting English. I was fighting the fear behind it. Because here's the truth most people never admit. You can't communicate well in any language if you're terrified of disappointing the person sitting across from you. Learning to love again meant retraining my ear, not just for English but for emotional truth. I started noticing her tone when she said, "I'm here," or "talk to me." I noticed how warmth lives in the pauses between her words. And slowly my own voice began to shift, not louder, not more fluent, just more honest. Neuroscience has a beautiful explanation for this. When you speak from emotional truth, the vagus nerve, the body's communication bridge, calms down. Your heartbeat steadies. Your breath evens. And language, even a second language, flows more freely. It's as if your body finally says, "Okay, now we can talk." We sat there for almost an hour, sipping warm coffee and exchanging small, fragile sentences that felt like stepping stones across a river. Each one carried us a little closer. Each one softened the distance between us that had grown over the past week. And as I watched her listening, really listening, I realized that love isn't just something you feel. It's something you practice. Slowly. Patiently. In every language your heart has learned to speak. Small repairs at night. There's a certain magic in late-night kitchens. The kind where the lights are dim. The air is quiet and conversations feel safer. Because the world has finally stopped demanding things from you. That night, around 10 p.m., we found ourselves moving around the kitchen like two people who weren't sure how to apologize but were tired of hurting. No dramatic speeches. No "we need to talk" energy. Just the soft rhythm of ordinary life. Running water, clinking dishes, the hum of the refrigerator. It's funny how healing often begins in places no one writes poetry about. Not in sunsets. Not in grand gestures. But over leftover pasta and mugs of lukewarm tea. Psychologists call these micro moments of repair. Tiny interactions that tell your nervous system, you're not alone. We're still here. And that night, those small repairs started happening almost by accident. She handed me a plate. Our fingers brushed, that I didn't flinch this time, that I handed her a towel. She smiled just barely, like she didn't want to scare the moment away. That we talked, but not about the heavy stuff. Not yet. We talked about the neighbor's dog, about the weather turning colder, about a funny video she saw earlier. And even though the topics were simple, the subtext was loud and clear. We're trying. That's the miracle of quiet love. Sometimes you repair the relationship without announcing. At one point, she leaned against the counter and said softly, "I missed you this week." Not the physical me, the emotional me, the version of me that had gone quiet, withdrawn, buried under old fear. And something inside me softened. Because when someone says they miss you while you're still in the same room, it means the distance wasn't physical. It was felt. So I took a breath, steadying the nervous flutter in my chest, and replied with the kind of English that requires no dictionary, no perfect grammar, just honesty. "I'm still here. I'm just learning how to show it again." She nodded, and I swear the entire house exhaled with us. Science explains why moments like this feel so healing. When you engage in small acts together, washing dishes, wiping counters, sharing quiet space, the brain releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical. It signals safety. It lowers defenses. It tells your inner child, "You're not fighting anymore." Suddenly, the room that felt tense all week feels like a sanctuary again. By midnight, we were sitting on the floor, backs against the cabinets, sharing a blanket and talking in low voices. Not solving everything. Not trying to. Just letting the night hold us while we rebuilt trust piece by tiny piece. And here's the thing I learned. Marriages aren't repaired in big moments. They're repaired in nights like this, quiet, unremarkable, tender nights where both people choose love in the smallest possible ways. A week of healing. There's a moment, usually small and almost invisible, when you realize something inside you has shifted. For me, it was Thursday morning, exactly 5 days after that quiet Sunday fight, when I caught myself speaking to her with a softness I didn't have the week before. Not a dramatic change, not some movie-style transformation, just a gentler tone, a steadier breath, a version of me that wasn't bracing for emotional impact. That's the strange thing about healing. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in through routine, through the way you say good morning, through the way you listen without trying to solve anything. It's almost like your nervous system finally believes you're safe enough to show up again. Throughout the week, I noticed little shifts in my voice, literally. My English sounded clearer, not because I was trying harder, but because I wasn't scared. When fear leaves the room, clarity enters. Neuroscientists explain it like this. When your emotional state stabilizes, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for language, lights up again. Basically, your brain stops panicking long enough to let you speak like a human being instead of a malfunctioning robot. Every day she met me halfway. Not with pressure, not with lectures, but with presence. Monday, she hugged me from behind while I was making coffee. Tuesday, we took a short walk around the block, talking about nothing and everything. Wednesday, she told me she was proud of the effort I was making. Even if the progress was messy, that it wasn't just her voice I was learning to hear again. It was mine. And somewhere between those days I realized my inner child was slowly coming out of hiding. The part of me that used to shut down was now peeking out. checking the emotional temperature, testing whether it was finally safe to speak. And every time she listened, every time she stayed, every time her face softened when I struggled to explain myself, that little version of me believed a little more. By Thursday night, something beautiful happened. We were sitting in the living room, the lights dim, her head on my shoulder. She asked gently, "How are you feeling today?" And for the first time in a long time, I didn't freeze. I didn't overthink. I didn't default to the old script that I just answered. Simply, honestly, "I feel closer to you." She smiled, one of those slow, genuine smiles that says, "I feel it too." And in that moment, I understood something I wish I'd learned years ago. Healing doesn't happen in giant leaps. It happens in a week like this, quiet, imperfect, real. A week where you learn to speak again, not just in English but in love. What love still needs. Maybe love isn't something we lose. Maybe it's something we slowly stop feeding. And this week, in the middle of my quiet American mornings and my stressful late-night conversations, I learned something simple but painful. Love doesn't break in one moment. At IT breaks when we stop giving it what it still needs. So what does love still need? After disappointment, after anger, after feeling like two people are living in two separate worlds. It needs three things, and every one of them is harder than saying "I love you." 1. Love still needs truth. Not the beautiful truth. Not the polite truth, but the uncomfortable truth you'd rather hide. And this week I realized how easy it is to pretend everything is fine just to avoid another argument. But pretending is poison. Love suffocates in silence long before it dies in conflict. So I told the truth, the simple truth, that a painful truth, that a truth I had avoided for months. And the moment I said it out loud, it felt like the first real breath I had taken in days. Repeat this line after me. Honesty protects love more than silence ever will. Shadow it again slowly. Feel every word point to. Love still needs choices. Not big ones. Not dramatic ones. Just small choices made every day. This week, I chose to stay at the table a little longer instead of walking away. I chose to listen instead of defending myself. I chose to ask, "How are you really?" instead of assuming I already knew. And suddenly, the distance between us shrank, one small choice at a time. Repeat this every day. Love grows or disappears depending on what I choose. Say it again. Let the words become a habit, not just a sentence. Point 3. Love still needs effort, even when you're tired, especially then. This week reminded me that love is not kept alive by fireworks, but by follow-through, by attention, by presence, by trying again, even when last night ended with tears. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do in a marriage is simply this. Stay soft. Not weak. Not silent, soft. Soft enough to listen. Soft enough to forgive. Soft enough to let your partner see the part of you that still hurts. Repeat this. Softness is strength in love. Final emphasis. So what does love still need from you today, right now, in this moment? Not perfection. Not answers. Not a miracle. Just a small piece of honesty. A small piece of choice. A small piece of effort. Love doesn't need much to survive. But it does need something. And if you're still here, if you're still listening, it means there is still something worth saving. Take a breath. Take a sentence. Take one small step. Your story isn't finished. Your love isn't finished. And neither are you.